DC Comics. Home to the proclaimed world's greatest superheroes, an imprint of various titles spanning over 80 years. Characters such as Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, and The Flash have made their debuts in the pages of DC and have since grown to become iconic. However, the popularity of these heroes clearly isn't inherently limited to comics. The development of video games, animation, and film adaptations has become the main influence for the public perception of these brands. In 2008, Iron Man, directed by Jon Favreau, became the first entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a franchise that essentially took unknown characters and built an interconnected web of movies similar to the world of the original comics. The overwhelming success of the MCU prompted DC to establish its own film universe after Christopher Nolan's critically acclaimed Dark Knight trilogy concluded. It was from this inception that the infamous DC Extended Universe was birthed, and who better to be the foundation of this franchise than DC's first hero, Superman. Creating a modern Superman film has always been a challenge for filmmakers. Superman Returns was released in 2006 and failed to recreate substantial interest in the character for low box office profit and mediocre critical reception. Across the 1990s and early 2000s, numerous directors and writers including J.J. Abrams, Mick G, and Tim Burton had been attached to Superman films that never left pre-production. However, in 2010, Warner Bros. Was basically forced to begin shooting a new Superman movie, otherwise they would be sued by the families of the creators of the character. Now, I'm not going to get into specific details of legal battles and court rulings, but I do find it interesting that Man of Steel was at least partially made out of Warner Bros. Not wanting to lose money, and after decades of uncertainty on the Superman property, this was what prompted development. Christopher Nolan had previously pitched an idea for Superman to Warner Bros. Involving a modern-day updating of the character set in its own world, similar to the Dark Knight films. This pitch would eventually become Man of Steel. Early in production, Zack Snyder was selected as the director of the film. Snyder at the time was known for 300 and Watchmen, both of which were of grand scale and involved the use of heavy practical and digital special effects. Snyder's eye for comic book-like cinematic framing was deemed as perfect for the world of Superman.
Chris kind of pitched me this version of Superman that I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then the script came over and we read it, and I really felt like, wow, there's a potential inside of this for a Superman that can do both things, that literally can live in two worlds. And that means the mythological and then the sort of real, our world. And kind of bridge that gap that he's never really bridged before, I don't think.
Personally, I don't think Man of Steel is a very good movie. It's more focused on making things look cool than the narrative intention behind them. But I will admit that I am kind of obsessed with this film. I'm fascinated by how, due to the film's messy screenplay, despite having so many outstanding technical elements such as cinematography and visual effects, it is all rendered meaningless. If you watch Man of Steel as a dumb, Fast and Furious-like action movie, where all you want is exciting fight scenes, it will seem pretty excellent. For example, in the Smallville battle between Clark and the Kryptonians, the sped-up movements of Superman are really visually unique, and the extraordinary amount of destruction on screen is certainly entertaining and well shot. Zack Snyder does have an eye for cool shit. Even though the scenes in Metropolis at the end of the film are filled with collateral damage basically to the point of self-parody, the world engine that terraforms the Earth is so destructive that I can't help but be amazed by the amount of over-the-top violence that is occurring on screen. Because the technical side of the film is so excellent, whenever story isn't occurring, the scenes are effective. The use of civilian perspectives on the ground with the staff of the Daily Planet gives a brief human look at what the implications of this world-changing event would look like. Granted, these action sequences are cool, but it all feels soulless given the movie tells you that Superman is the hero character, but he's the one who flies Zod into the heart of Smallville to fight. It's been said time and time again, but Superman as a character in the movie doesn't really develop, and for that reason he is boring. His arc is completed by the start of the second act, with him learning how to properly use his powers and then being told by Jor-El that he must be a hero for Earth. After that, he basically just fights waves of enemies until the credits roll, and nothing more about his character is further revealed. You also don't really get to know who Clark Kent is, and the movie frames him as if he is flawless. So in the film there is this device called the Codex, which determines which profession Kryptonians become before they are born. Clark is the first natural-born Kryptonian in centuries, and Jor-El's intention is to allow his son to have free will over his life without it being decided for him. The film establishes this as a theme in the opening scene. However, this theme is overridden by the character of Jonathan Kent, who throughout the film constantly reminds Clark that he is going to change the world and that he is destined for greatness, which essentially determines understands what he's going to become. This is why Superman is hard to relate to in this film. You never get a sense of why he wants to be a hero. In the first act, you see Clark moving from job to job, trying to figure out where he comes from, and you understand that because he's displayed to be an outsider. However, once he finds out that he's from Krypton, he stops being an active character. Clark never has the moment where he makes the conscious decision that he must commit his life to using his powers for good. For example, in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, Peter Parker decides to become a hero after he uses his powers for his own personal gain, leading to Uncle Ben's death. In Man of Steel, Clark is told by Jor-El and Jonathan Kent that he must become a hero for Earth, and he complies. There is no scene that displays Clark's personal motivation outside of this. It doesn't help that throughout the movie, Superman remorselessly draws Zod into civilian-populated areas like in the Smallville scene. The movie might tell you that Superman is a hero, but a lot of his actions say otherwise. A common criticism of Man of Steel is Superman ending Zod's life at the end of the film. Truthfully, Zod was not going to give up peacefully, and at that point the Phantom Zone had been destroyed, so there was no way for Zod to be imprisoned. Essentially, in the context of the movie, Superman is given no choice but to kill. I think this scene could have worked if throughout the film, Superman was displayed as committed to saving everyone he possibly could, so at the end he is tested by having no choice but to take a life. Maybe that would go against his values in the comics, but for the film's own narrative, it would work. I think the film was sort of trying to communicate this with Clark's emotional reaction to killing Zod, but given he made little attempt to save civilians earlier in the film, it doesn't have any effect and feels redundant. The movie incorporates flashbacks into the narrative, which I think was quite a good idea rather than just telling the story linearly. Despite this, the flashback scenes that are selected are mostly unnecessary. Batman Begins has a similar use of flashbacks, however there are only 2 in that film, and they show Bruce Wayne's parents dying and then Bruce's decision to leave Gotham respectively. They are absolutely needed in that film. The only flashback scenes that were needed in Man of Steel were the scene with Clark saving the bus and Jonathan Kent's death. The other past scenes are unnecessary because in the present day scenes, we already see Clark learning to use his powers responsibly. As I said before, the use of Jonathan Kent in this movie conflicts with the overall theme of deciding your own fate.
Oh, Clark, you have to keep this side of yourself a secret.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
I would change the school bus flashback by having Jonathan say to Clark that he did the right thing by saving the people on the bus, but he has to be careful about protecting his identity, rather than telling Clark that he should have considered not saving the kids. And then I would change the Jonathan Kent death scene by having Clark attempt to save his father, but failing. Then when he kills Zod at the end, the scene's parallel because it shows that Superman just can't save everyone, but reinforces Clark's commitment to a never-ending fight for hope. This would strengthen Superman's motivation and make him seem like more of a hero as the movie is trying to present him to be. It is clear that a huge amount of effort went into this film. The costumes, for example, were very intricately designed.
First thing you got to figure out is what's the suit going to look like, and especially a modern one. What's the S going to look like?
We really very much wanted the suit to have come from someplace, to come from that legacy of Krypton. And so we had to create a world where that kind of outfit was commonplace.
And rather than the traditional thing, which is it was made out of the cloth that his parents wrapped him in when he was sent off from Krypton, in our version, the Superman suit is, in a sense, it's like the foundation, it's the undergarment that all Kryptonians wear. It's kind of like what a medieval chainmail suit is to the knights of the medieval times. That's the same as our sort of Superman suit, which in fact has a chainmail motif on it.
Unlike the majority of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and modern blockbusters in general, Man of Steel made use of real sets and locations. The Smallville fight took almost 2 weeks to shoot in Plano, Illinois, and included various stunts and explosions to complete.
The Smallville battle was a massive undertaking. Elements from visual effects, to wires, to helicopters, to explosions, cars, car crashes, etc. It was a 2-week shoot in which we had one unit that Zack ran the entire time. The Smallville battle is unique in the sense that other than from the Kent farm to the gas station, that flying scene between Superman and Zod, and the interior of the IHOP being shot on green screen, the entire rest of the battle was all shot on location. Because we wanted that human element, we wanted that raw, real feel, and we didn't want to shoot this one on a green screen. It's a handheld movie. It's made with the same group of guys that I make all my movies with, and it's a really small team of guys that I work with. And I don't know, it just, to me, it always, no matter how big, the movie visually is, it's made in a really kind of handmade way. And so there's an organic quality to the movie.
Whilst Avengers Infinity War has a better story and a lot of its action is outstanding, Man of Steel will likely hold up better in the future due to the use of elaborately thought out practical effects. The use of the CGI elements are also very well designed. The way that the ground rises when Superman prepares to fly gives a sense of weight to his flight.
We only shot for a short period of time on an actual location in Chicago. We knew that we were going to have to rip this city apart like no city in a movie featuring a superhero or maybe even aliens has ever been ripped apart. We really had to go to a green screen stage and make Metropolis the largest CG city we could, which ended up being about 32 square miles of rendered CG city that could be ripped apart in all manners of ways.
We really chose to focus on establishing Krypton to get a better sense of where they come from, what they were faced with as a culture and as a planet on the edge of self-destruction. I think it was important to us to really get at the heart of who the Kryptonians are.
The casting of the film was also perfectly selected. Henry Cavill had been chosen to play Superman in previous reboots of the property that never began shooting.
How close did you get in 2006?
I have no idea. It was a completely different movie to what actually came out. I mean, I was on with a different director, McGee, with a different script, different suit and everything, as far as the screen test went, and then that movie all fell apart. And when Bryan Singer came on with his script, I just didn't fit into his vision.
Despite playing a soulless version of the character, he still brings a charismatic performance to the role that elevates the script. I particularly like Cavill's acting in the scene where Clark returns home to Smallville, where he just seems very calm and friendly in contrast to what is demanded of him throughout the rest of the film.
I'm worried they'll take you away from me.
I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I promise.
Cavill took the time to train for that role, and physically looks incredibly powerful.
Clark is the kind of guy who doesn't want to be noticed. He wants to stay hidden because he's worried about being discovered. And Superman is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It's a guy who, it's the same guy, but he can use his powers to its full effect and finally stand tall.
The character of General Zod, played by Michael Shannon, is one of the film's elements that is basically flawless. His motivation to rebuild Krypton on Earth is very well established, and he poses a genuine threat to Superman both physically and morally. The way that the character is introduced to Superman through the television is an eerie scene that sets up Zod's reign of terror to follow. Shannon's performance, despite being slightly over the top at times, is still intimidating and overall entertaining. Amy Adams as Lois Lane is a good fit for the role, and she handles both the comedic and dramatic sides of the character well, despite not necessarily having a huge amount to do in the film. The rest of the supporting cast, including Russell Crowe, Lawrence Fishburne, Diane Lane, and Kevin Costner, are all examples of great casting and are well matched for the grounded world of the film. Hans Zimmer composed the score for Man of Steel, and I would argue that it is better than John Williams' original music for Superman.
I've used drums before in scores, but if you have one drummer, it sounds a bit cheesy. It's a little bit like if you have one solo violin, it's always sort of right in your face, but if you have a string section, it sounds beautiful. I thought, what if we could get the 12 greatest drummers and meld them into one giant machine of energy?
The drum-heavy themes with the juxtaposition of the electric guitar and the broader orchestra is a beautiful companion to the film, and when the credits roll, despite me having an overwhelming feeling of emptiness due to the film's writing, the triumphant music is still uplifting. The cinematography in parts does look like a J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, especially when on Krypton or on Zod's ship. However, for the most part, Zack Snyder really does have an eye for shots that are visually stunning. The sequence where Superman flies for the first time uses a variety of different wide-angle shots, and combined with the music, it does feel almost tangibly cool. The parts at the start of the movie with Clark in hiding are also excellently framed, and do give the sense of an extraordinary person living among a normal setting. Still later in the film, mostly in the final fight between Zod and Superman, the color grading becomes quite dark and is not as visually appealing as the rest of the movie. But for 90% of the film, the photography is undeniably beautiful, and because of Snyder's visual talent through using drawings instead of a shot list, Man of Steel is able to achieve what most blockbusters can't in how the shots themselves communicate a story.
I love production, I like shooting. You know, it's fun for me. Being on set and seeing Henry in his costume, you know, coming out, putting him on a wire. There was just something really magical.
However, truthfully, this movie is a testament to the idea that if you don't have a good narrative, almost everything else becomes meaningless. And it's a shame because I genuinely think that almost every technical aspect of this film is perfect. There is so much potential for a masterpiece in Man of Steel. It's frustrating because with some very small but significant changes to the screenplay, the film could have been great. It almost feels like they used the first draft of the script. The film received mixed reviews at the time, and is still regarded as solid at best. It's a weird movie because it's such a contrast of genuinely excellent music, cinematography, and action against a lackluster narrative. A movie like Ant-Man will always be regarded as better than Man of Steel, but where Ant-Man is mediocre across the board, Man of Steel is still half great, and for that reason I would recommend it, because say what you will about Zack Snyder, but you can't say he didn't make exactly the movie he wanted to.
No, it's absolutely exactly what I wanted it to be. I definitely, have really been pleased with everyone's, not only the performances in the movie, but from my production design team and my visual effects team and cinematography, everyone really, and of course Henry, everyone's really just done a bang-up job in the movie. I couldn't be happier.
Please make sure to like and comment, and if you want to help me make more videos, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.